Welcome back, students. I hope that you have already watched the previous videos and have already tweaked around with your Python notebook. Now, before we dive deeper into Python programming, you would need to understand data, the type of data that are present in Python. Now, the first data type that I will be showing you are numeric data. And as you have guessed, numeric are number data. Now, if I type in 64, you would say this is a whole number. But in Python, whole numbers are regarded as integers. Now, whenever you want to see the type of a particular data, you would want to enclose the data inside a type function. If you do so, this would return you the type of this number. If I execute this cell, see, this has returned me that this is an integer type number. Now, second type of numeric constant are decimal values. Now, if I add a decimal point with 64 and suppose I say it's 64.56, now this is a decimal data, right? But in Python, they are called as float. Now, if I enclose this inside type, you would see that it returns me that it is a float type. Now, the second type of data that you would need to worry about are string constant. Now, what is a string? A string is a sequence of characters. They're basically words. Now, if I type in hello, this is a word, right? Now, if you execute this, this would return an error. This is because the Python interpreter couldn't recognize this as a string. Now, if you want it to recognize this as a string, you have to enclose this inside quotations. You can use double quotations or single quotations. Both would work. Now let's stay with single quotation, and if I enclose this inside type function, you would see that it would return me str. So this is a string type data. Now, these are the type of data that are available in Python. However, you would want to hold them inside a container. Now, whenever you want to store a data, you have to assign it to a variable. So now I will be introducing you to variables in Python. So what is a variable actually? Let me implement it so you will have a better idea. Now suppose I gave it a name, let's say value, and I assign it a value of 64. Now this expression represents that the value 64 has been assigned to the value variable. So let's give it a better name. Let's call it val so that we don't get confused with value and the value variable. If I call it val, and what I've done here is I have assigned 64 to val. However, you might get confused that this is equals to 64, which is usually the case in maths, right? But in programming, this represents assignment. That is the right hand side of the equation. Whatever is in the right hand side gets stored on in the variable in the left hand side. Now, if you rewrote this as 64 equals to val, now this is not allowed in Python. You cannot do that. You can only define the variable in the left hand side of the equal to and the value on the right hand side. Now if I run this, you would see it would return me an error. This cannot be assigned in this manner. Now there are some restrictions while naming your variable. Now the first restriction is that the first character has to be a letter or an underscore. Now if I name my variable with a number at the beginning, this is violating the first condition. Now let's say it 9 value equals to 64. If I execute this, this returns me an error. So you cannot use a number at the beginning of a variable. It has to be a letter or an underscore. Now the second condition states that the rest of the variable may contain letter, underscore, or numbers. So instead of calling it 9val, you could have named it val9. This is not violating any condition. So you are only allowed to use letters, underscore, or numbers. Now if you want to do something like this, val name, what you've done here, you have added a space. Now this is violating the second condition, right? If you run this, because it has said that you cannot have anything other than letters, underscores, and numbers, and space is not one of them. Now if you run this will return you an error. So you cannot give space in your variable name. Now the third point says that a variable is case sensitive. See, if you have declared a variable, let us declare it as val equals to 64. Now you have declared this variable as val, and if you want to see its value, what you have to do is just type in the variable at the last line of a code block, and if you execute this, this would return you the value of the variable. There is another way you could output the value, that is if you enclose this inside a print function. This would do the same thing. See, it is returning us the value. Now you know that this val contains the value 64, right? Now if you wanted to do something like this, that is if you think that you can print val, this is also val, but this is in capital letters, you would think that it would return you 64, but if you execute this, it doesn't recognize val, because I have told you that variables are case sensitive. So you have understood the third restriction as well. And finally, reserved words cannot be used as variable names. Now there are certain words that Python uses for its own functions. You cannot use them as variable name. So these are the words that has been taken or reserved by Python for its own use. Now suppose I give my variable a name called from C and give it a value of 64. Now whenever you give a variable a name which has been reserved by Python, you would see that the variable gets highlighted. Now, obviously you wouldn't memorize all the names that have been taken by Python, right? So whenever you would see that a variable is getting highlighted, you would understand that the variable is reserved. Now if you run this will give an error. Now let us move on. Now you can assign multiple values to multiple variables at the same time. Now suppose I have two variables called val1, and then I'm separating it with a comma, and val2. I am assigning the first variable a value of 45 and the second variable a string called hello. Now this expression represents that val1 will be assigned with the value 45 and val2 will store the value hello. Now if you print val1 and print val2, you would see that the first output would be 45 and the second output would be hello. So if you print this, see, it's 45 and hello. Now if you want to swap the values between these two variables, that is, if you want hello to be stored in val1 and 45 to be stored in val2, you could do this. You could type in val1 comma val2 equals to sorry, we would want to swap it. So val1 comma val2 equals to val2 comma val1. Now this represents the value in val2 will be stored in val1 and the value in val1 will be stored in val2. Now if you print val1 and print val2, you would see that the first output would be hello because val1 has hello stored inside it and val2 will have 45. Now if I execute this, see, the first output is hello and the second output is 45. So we have swapped the values as well. Now let's move on to strings again. Now like I have said, you can store numeric values or string values to a variable. Now let us give it a name first to the variable. Let us call it multiline. Now if you want an output like this, hello students, in two separate lines, and if you do it in this way, that is hello and then press enter students. Now if you run this will give you an error. To tackle this problem, you have to use triple quotation. See, I have used triple quotation. Now if you print this, you print multiline, see, you have the output as you have wanted it to be. You have the output in two separate lines. Now if you want to print a particular character of a string, now let's see how we can go about this. Let us first define a variable. Let us call it var equals to hello. Now like I have said, a string is what? A sequence of characters. So this string has 5 characters in it, HELLO. Now if you want to know the length of a string, you can use a function called len, length. This, and if you place value inside it, val inside it, this would return what? The length of this. Oh sorry, you have to place var. Now if you place var inside it, it would return the length of the value stored in var. Now what is stored in var? The string called hello is stored in var, and it would return the length of hello, which would be 5. Now if we run this, see, it has returned me 5. Now I'm going to tell you a very important point. Normally when you count, you start from 1 2 3. Now if I tell you to return the second character in this string, you would say that it would return E, right? So let's see how you can return. Now whenever you want to access a particular character of a string, so let's do it separately. Now if you want to access a particular character of a string, you have to use square brackets. First tell the name of the variable and then use square brackets. Now what I asked you is to return the second character of this string. Now you would obviously use 2 here because you think that 2 would return the second character of the string, which should be E. Now if you run this, you would see that it is returning L, which is the third character. Now this is important. In programming, counting starts from 0. So H would be the 0th character, then the first character would be E, 2, 3, 4. So always remember, in programming, counting starts from 0. Now if somebody asks you to return the third character of this string, what you would do is first count from 0, 0, 1, 2, and you place 2 inside this square bracket, and if you execute this cell, see, it returns L. So this is how you could print a character of a string. Now if I ask you to print the last character, you might want to place 5 here. However, I've told you that counting starts from 0, so the last character would be 4. If you run this, it should return O. Now if you want to add two strings, right, so I have declared var as hello. Now let me declare another variable which stores world. Now if you want to concat these two variables, that is, you want an output called hello world, so you can use the plus operator. So okay, sorry, I have to rename it as var1 because I've already named this as var. So let me tell you this. So what mistake I did here is that I named the variable which has already been declared as hello. Now when I say that var equals to world, what it did is it would replace the value in var from hello to world. That is, let me show you. If I run this, the value in var is hello, right? Now if you run this, you might expect the value to remain as hello. However, when you assigned it to world, the value changed. If you run this, this returns world. So this is how you can change the value of a variable. Now as I was saying about concatenation, you would want to give it a different name and then add the two variables. The first variable is var, and then you add var with var1. If you execute this, see, it returns me, oh sorry, I have to run this cell again because I've updated the variable with world. That's why it returned me world. Now if I run this, it would return me hello world. Now if you want a space in between, what you can do is add a quotation with a space in between and then plus. What it is doing is It is concatenating the value in var, that is hello, and then adding a space and then adding world. Now if you run this, you will have hello world. Now if you want to repeat a string multiple times, you can use the multiplication operator. Now if you want this hello to be outputted 5 times, so let's multiply this with 5. So this returns 4 times 5. See, it returns the string 5 times. Now there is another type of data in Python which I haven't yet talked about. Now whenever you make some logical comparisons, that is, if a number is greater than another number or if it is equal to another number, the data type that is returned is called a Boolean data. So whenever you make logical comparisons, right, there are only two possible outcomes. If you say that if a number is greater than another number, it can either be true or false. So this true and false are known as Boolean data. So let us see some examples. Now if I say 3 is greater than 5, so this is a true statement, right? So this would return sorry, if 3 is greater than 5, right? So this is a false statement. 3 is obviously not greater than 5, so this has returned false. Now if you say that if 3 is equals to 5, now what this represents is that if these two numbers are equal. Now previously I have said that if you use one equal, that is, you're assigning the value in the right hand side to the variable in the left hand side. And if you use two equal, this represents that if the value on the left hand side equals to the value on the right hand side. Now if you execute this cell, this would return true because 3 is equals to 3. Now if you say that if 3 is 3 not equals to 3, right, so this would return false. Now in Excel you have seen not equals to written like this, but in Python we write not equals to with an exclamation mark and then an equal. Now if you want to write another condition, that is if 4 is less than equals to 5, it is less than equals to 5. If you execute this, this would return true. And finally, if you say that if 8 is greater than equals to 2, this would also return true. So what we have seen here are comparison between two numbers and that they return a Boolean data as its result. So this was all from this tutorial, and we will be diving deeper into Python in the next videos. So best of luck.